This is a short presentation about shared decision making, following the production of the latest NICE Guidelines in July 2021. Why is this important? It's important because we know it's acknowledged by official sources that between 1/3 and half of all medicines prescribed for long-term conditions are not taken as recommended. This is supported by our work on patient-led medicines reviews, where patients share with us in confidence what medicines they're actually taking. The NHS Constitution for England states that people have the right to be involved in planning and making decisions about their health and care, and to be given information to support and enable this. The threshold for what information us clinicians need to share with patients has also changed. The Montgomery versus Lannister case in 2015 set a new post-Bolam legal standard to protect people's rights to make informed decisions on care and treatment. Prior to this ruling, the Bolam versus Free Hospital Management Committee in 1957 was said to provide a protective shield if the practice in question is accepted by a reasonable body of medical opinion. The law now requires clinicians to make reasonable care to ensure that the patient is aware of any material risks involved in any recommended treatment and of any reasonable alternative or variant treatments. We refer to this again in the vlog on ethics, the law and prescribing. Many patients and patient leaders and educators have also questioned the use of the term shared decision making, pointing out that ultimately it's the patient's decision as to what medicines they take and the patient's decision alone. This is supported by the lesser known NICE guidance from 2009 entitled Medicines Adherence, involving patients in decisions about prescribing and supporting adherence. Adherence being what happens over time. As described in this guideline, that's the extent to which patients' action matches the agreed recommendations. So what's new in the NICE guidelines on shared decision making? The three main areas of recommendations are organisational, practice-related, and recommendations on communication and documentation. At this point, it's important for me to say that I'm giving you my personal summary of these guidelines, and this isn't a substitute for reading them yourself. You will see things I don't see, have different priorities, and be able to relate them specifically to your area of practice. On an organisational level, the 2021 NICE Guideline on shared decision making asks organisations to consider the following: making a senior leader accountable for the leadership and embedding of shared decision making, considering appointing a patient director to work with this senior leader. The guidance also states that for effective shared decision making, appointment or consultation times may need to be longer. Here the guideline acknowledges that this could have an impact on resources, pointing out that over time this approach could reduce the number of appointments and ensure that the right decisions are made with people. I mention these recommendations under organisation and leadership because I believe accepting, implementing and spreading this will help deliver safer and more cost-effective care. Here are three reflective questions. Do you have a senior leader who owns shared decision making? And is this discussed at management meetings? Does your organisation or team have patient leaders who link with senior leaders? Are appointment times discussed in your team and by senior leaders, especially when setting up new services or new initiatives? Do you have any examples that you could share that show the benefits of longer consultation times for certain conditions? Moving on to practice-based recommendations, the NICE Guideline on shared decision making contains three areas that stood out for me. Firstly, the guideline mentions using evidence-based models to help with decision making. We've all heard of the golden minute, during which we let the patient speak freely and uninterrupted, and the ICE model to elicit ideas, concerns and expectations. The NICE guidance mentions the 3-talk model, which in summary involves choice talk, option talk and decision talk, which leads to a shared decision. Secondly, the shared decision-making guideline reiterates that effective and safe shared decision-making needs action before, during and after the consultation. Only with this can we be sure that there is an actual adherence and that the patient has not misunderstood the directions. This misunderstanding is referred to as unintentional non-adherence. Alternatively, has the patient changed their mind and altered their medicines or stopped taking some medicines? This is referred to as intentional non-adherence. If so, have they had the opportunity to tell you this, and do they trust you enough to tell you? Thirdly, the guideline discusses use of evidence-based patient decision aids and graphical presentation, and gives some important information on presenting numerical information. Note here the need to talk about absolute risk rather than relative risk. NICE gives the example of expressing that the risk of an event increases from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 2,000, rather than saying the risk of the event doubles. Frequently, the drug industry shares relative figures rather than absolute figures, as they can appear better on the surface. I refer to this again in a vlog entitled Pharmacology Refresher. So when reflecting on this, ask yourself, what models do you use in your consultations? How do you share information on medicines before, during and after consultations? How do you check for intentional and non-intentional non-adherence? How can you ask questions to best elicit information, given that the patient may be concerned about the consequences of telling you they're not taking the medicines as prescribed? And what patient decision aids do you use? Finally, the NICE Guidelines on shared decision making make some important recommendations around communication and documentation. The guideline reminds us to send clinic letters and summaries to the patient, and specifically talks about something some have been doing for a long time, which is writing the letter to the patient, copied to other clinicians involved. It's good to see this in the guideline. The guideline suggests asking patients if they would like to record consultations. This is something which I hope will become standard practice, and it can be done right now. The guidance also talks about the merits of patient-held records. These do exist in some areas, such as maternity and community paediatrics, but they're not yet common practice. Also, the guideline suggests and recommends using a healthcare worker or a third party as a support for the patient. I've been working on a project in Scotland on exactly this. I hope you found this useful, and it provides materials for discussion and reflection. These, of course, can be used in your appraisals, in peer reviews, and for revalidation. You can find a template for reflection here.